What happens when Hollywood royalty sits down for what should be a routine morning interview, only to have the host turn the conversation into a minefield of disrespect and condescension? In just 38 seconds, one question ignited a firestorm that would expose the ugly side of celebrity journalism and leave millions of viewers watching in stunned disbelief as an iconic actor finally said, "Enough is enough." It was supposed to be a standard appearance on Good Morning America. Denzel Washington, the two-time Academy Award winner and one of the most respected actors of his generation, was there to discuss his latest directorial project. The cameras were rolling, the studio audience was excited, and Michael Strahan, the former football star turned television host, was ready to conduct what everyone expected would be a friendly, upbeat conversation. But from the moment Denzel walked onto that set, something felt off. The energy was wrong. Where there should have been warmth and mutual respect between two accomplished men, there was a palpable tension hanging in the air like storm clouds before lightning strikes. Strahan greeted Denzel with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm, shaking his hand and welcoming him to the show. The audience applauded. Denzel took his seat, composed and professional as always, ready to share insights about his craft and his passion for storytelling. The interview began innocently enough. Strahan asked about the film, about the challenges of directing while also acting, about working with the talented cast. Denzel answered each question with the thoughtfulness and eloquence that fans have come to expect from him over his decades in the spotlight. He spoke about the responsibility of telling meaningful stories, about the importance of representation in cinema, about the joy of collaborating with gifted artists. But then, just as the interview seemed to be settling into a comfortable rhythm, Strahan shifted gears. His tone changed. His body language became more aggressive, leaning forward in his chair with a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "So, Denzel," Strahan began, his voice dripping with a condescension that made viewers at home immediately uncomfortable. "I've got to ask you something that I think a lot of people are wondering. You've been in this business for what, 40 years now? Don't you think maybe it's time to, pass the torch to younger talent? I mean, how much longer are you going to keep taking roles that could go to the next generation?" The studio audience went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the crew members standing off camera exchanged shocked glances. This was not the kind of question you asked someone of Denzel Washington's stature. This was disrespectful. This was insulting. Denzel's expression remained calm, but those who knew him well could see the flash of anger in his eyes. He took a slow, measured breath before responding. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Denzel asked, his voice steady but with an edge that suggested he had heard perfectly well the first time. Strahan, either oblivious to the line he had just crossed or simply not caring, doubled down. "I'm just saying, man, you're getting up there in age. Don't you think the industry needs fresh faces, young actors who can bring new energy to these roles?" The disrespect was stunning. Here was Michael Strahan, a man who had transitioned from sports to television only a handful of years ago, questioning the relevance and value of one of the greatest actors of all time. The audacity was breathtaking. Denzel leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, he simply looked at Strahan, really looked at him. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, powerful, and impossible to misinterpret. "Let me tell you something, Michael. I've been working in this industry since before you knew what a camera was. I've earned every single role I've ever played through talent, dedication, and respect for the craft. I'm not taking anything from anybody. I'm not blocking anyone's path. Young actors get opportunities based on their ability, not because someone like me decides to step aside so they can have a turn." The power in Denzel's voice was unmistakable. This was not anger. This was righteous indignation. This was a man who had spent his entire life being excellent at what he does, being told by someone who had barely scratched the surface of entertainment that maybe he should consider retiring. Strahan tried to backtrack, realizing perhaps too late that he had made a serious miscalculation. No, Denzel, I think you misunderstood me. But Denzel wasn't having it. "I didn't misunderstand anything. You asked me if I should step aside. You questioned whether I still belong in this industry. Let me make something very clear to you and to everyone watching. I will continue to work for as long as I choose to work. I will continue to tell stories that matter. And I will continue to do it with excellence, because that's what I've always done, and that's what I will always do." The audience began to applaud, softly at first. Then building into thunderous support for Denzel, people were standing. They recognized that they were witnessing something important, a moment where dignity and self-respect were being defended against casual disrespect disguised as journalism. Strahan's face had gone red. He looked to the producers off camera, clearly hoping for some kind of guidance or rescue, but this was his mess to deal with. He had created this situation with his thoughtless, entitled questioning. "Denzel, I apologize if my question came across wrong," Strahan attempted, but his tone suggested he didn't really understand why he should be apologizing. Denzel shook his head slowly. "It didn't come across wrong. It was wrong. And I think we're done here." Before anyone could react, Denzel stood up from his chair. He removed the small microphone that had been clipped to his jacket and placed it carefully on the table in front of him. The gesture was deliberate, final, and spoke volumes. Strahan looked panicked now. "Wait, Denzel, we still have 10 minutes left in the segment. We can talk about something else. We can move on." But Denzel was already turning toward the exit. He paused for just a moment, looking back at Strahan with an expression that was equal parts disappointment and resolve. You need to learn the difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful. Today, you crossed that line. I hope you figure that out before you damage your credibility beyond repair. And with that, Denzel Washington walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind a stunned host, a confused production crew, and millions of viewers who had just witnessed what happens when entitlement meets dignity. Strahan sat there, speechless. As the cameras continued to roll, the producers scrambled to cut to a commercial break. But not before the world saw the look of realization dawning on Strahan's face. He had just publicly disrespected one of the most beloved figures in entertainment, and there was no taking it back. The silence in the studio was deafening. Co-hosts sitting at the desk nearby looked at each other with wide eyes, clearly unsure of what they had just witnessed or how they should respond. The audience, which had been applauding for Denzel moments earlier, now sat in uncomfortable quiet. One of the producers finally gave the signal, and Strahan attempted to recover. "Well, that was Denzel Washington, everyone. We'll be right back after this break." But the damage was done. As the show cut to commercials, the reality of what had just transpired began to sink in. Michael Strahan, the man who had built a successful career on his charm and likability, had just revealed a side of himself that viewers had never seen before. He had been condescending, dismissive, and shockingly disrespectful to a guest who deserved nothing but admiration and courtesy. What made the moment even more striking was the contrast between the two men. Denzel had handled himself with grace under pressure, maintaining his composure even as he firmly stood up for himself and his legacy. He didn't shout, he didn't insult, he simply stated the truth with the kind of authority that comes from decades of excellence and integrity. Strahan, on the other hand, had displayed the worst kind of entitlement, the entitlement of someone who believes their platform gives them the right to question anyone about anything, regardless of how inappropriate or hurtful that questioning might be. The entitlement of someone who doesn't understand the difference between being provocative and being rude. As the commercial break continued, backstage chaos erupted. Producers were making frantic phone calls. Publicists for both the show and Denzel were trying to figure out damage control strategies. Network executives were being pulled into emergency meetings. This was not how a morning talk show appearance was supposed to go. Meanwhile, Denzel was in his dressing room, calmly collecting his things. Members of his team approached him, asking if he was okay, if there was anything they needed to do. He assured them he was fine, that he had simply done what needed to be done. There was no anger in his demeanor now, no frustration, just a quiet resolve that comes from knowing you've stood up for yourself with dignity. Back in the studio, the show returned from commercial break. Strahan was back on camera, but the confidence he usually exuded was noticeably absent. He stumbled through the next segment, clearly rattled by what had happened. His co-hosts tried to help carry the show, but everyone could feel the shift in energy. The morning's biggest moment had already happened, and it wasn't the kind of moment anyone wanted to remember. The question that Strahan had asked, the one that started this entire confrontation, revealed something troubling about how some people in the media view aging actors. The suggestion that Denzel should step aside simply because of his age ignored everything he had accomplished, everything he continued to accomplish. It reduced a legendary career to nothing more than a matter of calendar years, as if talent and ability somehow expire once you reach a certain age. Denzel Washington has won 2 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globes, and a Tony Award. He has directed critically acclaimed films, He has mentored countless young actors. He has used his platform to advocate for important causes. He has given performances that will be studied and celebrated for generations. And someone thought it was appropriate to ask him if maybe he should consider retiring to make room for others. The absurdity of that question, the sheer disrespect it represented, was what made Denzel's response so necessary and so powerful. He wasn't just defending himself, he was defending every actor who has ever been told they're too old, every artist who has been pressured to step aside before they're ready, every professional who has had their value questioned simply because of age rather than ability. As Denzel left the building that morning, walking past security and out into the New York City streets, he did so with his head held high. He had nothing to apologize for. He had responded to disrespect with dignity, to rudeness with truth. He had shown millions of people watching at home that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that tolerating disrespect in the name of being polite or accommodating is not a requirement. Inside the studio, Strahan finished the show somehow, but it was clear to everyone that something fundamental had shifted. The confident, charismatic host who had started the morning ready to conduct another interview had been exposed as someone capable of shocking insensitivity. Whether that was a momentary lapse in judgment or a glimpse into his true character, only time would tell. The moment highlighted a broader problem in celebrity journalism. Too often, hosts and interviewers mistake controversy for compelling content. They believe that asking provocative or confrontational questions makes for good television, without considering whether those questions are fair, appropriate, or even ethical. They forget that the people sitting across from them are human beings, deserving of basic respect, not just content to be exploited for ratings. Denzel's walkout was a reminder that there are lines that should not be crossed, boundaries that must be respected. Being a public figure does not mean surrendering the right to be treated with dignity. Having a platform as a host does not grant permission to belittle or diminish guests, no matter how famous they might be. What made the incident particularly striking was how it unfolded. There was no yelling, no dramatic outburst, no name calling. Denzel simply stated his position clearly and firmly, then removed himself from a situation where he was not being treated with appropriate respect. It was a masterclass in how to handle conflict with grace. Strahan's attempt to suggest that Denzel had misunderstood the question was particularly telling. It's a common tactic when someone realizes they've crossed a line to claim that their words were taken out of context or misinterpreted. But Denzel hadn't misunderstood anything. The question was clear, the implication was obvious, and the disrespect was undeniable. The fact that Strahan, a former athlete who transitioned to broadcasting relatively recently, felt comfortable questioning the career longevity of someone like Denzel Washington speaks to a certain kind of hubris. It suggests a lack of awareness about the entertainment industry, about the value of experience and wisdom, about the different paths that different careers can take. Athletes often retire in their 30s because the physical demands of their sports make it necessary. But actors, particularly great actors, can continue to work and excel well into their later years. Some of the greatest performances in cinema history have come from older actors who brought decades of experience and emotional depth to their roles. To suggest that age is somehow a liability in acting reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the craft. Denzel's response about earning every role through talent and dedication was particularly powerful. He wasn't claiming special treatment or asking for roles based on his past achievements. He was simply stating a fact. He gets work because he's excellent at what he does. The industry doesn't owe him anything, and he's not taking anything from anyone. He's earning opportunities the same way he always has, through exceptional ability. The comment about young actors getting opportunities based on ability rather than because someone else steps aside was also significant. It pushed back against the false narrative that there's a limited number of roles and older actors need to move aside to make room. The entertainment industry is vast. There's space for talent at every age, at every experience level. Suggesting otherwise creates a false competition between generations that doesn't need to exist. As Denzel placed that microphone on the table and stood up, he was making a statement that resonated far beyond that studio. He was saying that respect is not optional. He was saying that being a gracious guest does not mean accepting disrespect. He was saying that there comes a point where walking away is not surrender, but self-respect. The producers cutting to commercial breaks so quickly was an admission that something had gone very wrong. They knew that what viewers had just witnessed was not good television in the traditional sense. It was uncomfortable, awkward, and reflected poorly on their host and their show, but it was also undeniably riveting. The kind of moment that people would talk about for days, weeks, maybe even years. Strahan's final words to Denzel, his plea to wait and continue the interview, revealed just how little he understood about what he had done. He seemed to think that moving on to another topic would fix the problem, that they could simply ignore what had just happened and carry on with the show. But you can't unring a bell. You can't ask someone if they should retire and then expect them to cheerfully discuss something else, as if nothing happened. Denzel's parting advice to Strahan about learning the difference between tough questions and disrespect was delivered with the tone of someone offering genuine wisdom rather than a bitter parting shot. It was the voice of experience speaking to inexperience, of someone who understands the responsibility that comes with a platform, trying to educate someone who clearly doesn't. The warning about damaging credibility was also prophetic. In that moment, Strahan's reputation as a friendly, approachable host took a serious hit. Viewers who had always seen him as likable and genuine now had to reconcile that image with what they had just witnessed. Trust, once lost, is difficult to rebuild, and the trust that audiences place in television personalities is based largely on how they treat people. The studio audience's reaction throughout the exchange was telling. Their initial silence at Strahan's question showed immediate recognition that something inappropriate had been said. Their applause for Denzel's response showed where their sympathies lay. Their uncomfortable quiet after Denzel left revealed the collective awkwardness of witnessing such a public confrontation. Television audiences are sophisticated. They can sense when something is off, when a host crosses a line, when a guest is being treated unfairly. The fact that people in the studio and watching at home immediately sided with Denzel speaks to the universality of his experience. Everyone has felt disrespected at some point. Everyone has wished they had the courage to stand up for themselves the way Denzel did in that moment. The contrast between Denzel's calm, measured responses and Strahan's increasingly flustered attempts to recover was stark. It showed the difference between someone who is secure in who they are and someone who is realizing, too late, that they've made a terrible mistake. It showed the difference between authentic confidence and the kind of bravado that crumbles under pressure. What happened on Good Morning America that morning was more than just a celebrity walking off a set. It was a moment of accountability, a reminder that actions have consequences, that words matter, that respect is earned, not assumed. It was a powerful demonstration of what it looks like to defend your dignity without losing your composure. Denzel Washington walked off that set having lost nothing. His reputation remained intact. His dignity remained intact. His legacy remained intact. He had simply refused to participate in his own disrespect, and in doing so, he had given millions of people a powerful example of self-respect in action. Michael Strahan, on the other hand, had revealed something about himself that would be difficult to forget. Whether it was arrogance, ignorance, or simply a momentary lapse in judgment, he had shown a side of himself that stood in sharp contrast to the persona he had carefully cultivated over years of broadcasting. The incident served as a reminder that being good at sports does not automatically translate to being good at conducting sensitive, respectful interviews, that having charm and likability does not excuse disrespectful behavior, that a television platform comes with responsibilities, including the responsibility to treat guests with basic human decency. It also highlighted the double standards that often exist in entertainment journalism. Would Strahan have asked the same question of a white actor of similar age and accomplishment? Would he have questioned whether someone like Robert De Niro or Al Pacino should step aside for younger talent? The question itself contained assumptions about age and relevance that seemed particularly targeted. Denzel's refusal to accept that line of questioning was therefore not just about defending himself. It was about pushing back against a pattern of disrespect that older actors, particularly older actors of color, often face in the industry. It was about asserting that talent and ability matter more than age, that experience and wisdom are assets, not liabilities. The moment when Denzel removed his microphone was symbolic. It was a physical representation of his decision to no longer participate in a conversation that had become disrespectful. It was a clear, unmistakable signal that he was done, that there would be no recovery from this, that Strahan had burned a bridge that could not be rebuilt in the remaining minutes of a television segment. Television is filled with moments that are carefully planned, scripted, and choreographed. What happened between Denzel Washington and Michael Strahan was none of those things. It was raw, real, and unscripted in the truest sense. It was human conflict playing out in real time, with real stakes and real consequences. That authenticity is part of what made it so compelling. Viewers could sense that they were witnessing something genuine, not a manufactured controversy designed to generate buzz. This was not publicity. This was not planned. This was one human being refusing to accept disrespect from another, regardless of cameras, audiences, or career considerations. The lesson from that morning was clear. Respect is not negotiable. It doesn't matter if you're the host of a major network television show. It doesn't matter if walking off will create awkwardness or controversy. When you're being treated with contempt disguised as journalism, you have every right to remove yourself from that situation. Denzel Washington demonstrated that standing up for yourself doesn't require dramatics or aggression. Sometimes the most powerful response is quiet dignity, clear truth, and the courage to walk away. Sometimes the most impactful statement you can make is refusing to participate in your own diminishment. In 38 seconds, Michael Strahan learned a lesson that should have been obvious from the start. When you disrespect greatness, don't be surprised when greatness refuses to tolerate it. When you question the value of someone who has spent decades proving their worth, don't be shocked when they decide they don't need to prove anything to you. What happened on Good Morning America that day will be remembered not for what was supposed to happen, but for what actually did. It will be remembered as the day a legendary actor refused to be disrespected, even in the middle of live television. It will be remembered as the day a host learned, the hard way, that a platform is not a license for rudeness. And it will be remembered as a powerful reminder that dignity, once claimed, is not easily taken away.